Welcome to the Relay Video Podcast from Dementia Researcher and ISTAART.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Imre Lengyel, an associate professor at Queen's University Belfast in the United Kingdom, and I'm the communication chair of the Eye as a Biomarker for Alzheimer's Disease Professional Interest Area, or PIA. Today, I'm delighted to be talking with Dr Maura Malpetti from Cambridge, also from the UK, just as myself. Hi, Maura.
Hi, Imre.
Maura, can I start by asking you to tell us which professional interest group are you involved in?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for interviewing me. It is great to be here and be interviewed by you. So I'm the program chair of the Frontotemporal Dementia Related Disorder PIA. And today I think there will be the opportunity to speak a bit more about this particular PIA.
Fantastic. Before we do that, Maura, I would love to hear a little bit about your own research.
So I'm Race Against Dementia and Alzheimer Research UK Fellow at the University of Cambridge. And for my research, I focus on biomarkers in frontotemporal dementia and related disorders. And when we speak about related disorders, we refer very often to conditions like progressive supranuclear palsy and cortical basal syndrome or degeneration. So these conditions are a bit different from Alzheimer's disease. Some of them tend to appear a bit younger, and they impact very different aspects. Memory can be part of the symptoms, but they are mainly involving personality changes, behavioral changes, language difficulties, and also motor symptoms. So in comparison to Alzheimer's disease, we have still very few biomarkers that are useful and very efficient in these conditions. For example, we cannot use much tau PET. There are only new tracers that seems to be working a bit better, but for example, amyloid PET can be used to differentiate these conditions from Alzheimer's disease. But what we really rely on is still MRI. And FDG PET. And in Cambridge, we are looking at two aspects in particular, inflammation and synaptic loss, which seems to be present across all the spectrum, independently from the clinical manifestation and the pathology underpinning these conditions. And we look at that with PET imaging, positron emission tomography, but also with fluid markers to look how these biomarkers can predict clinical outcomes in people with these conditions.
This is very interesting, but I'm wondering what brought you to dementia research?
So yeah, that's a very interesting question. So I was a very sciencey kid. I really loved everything that was nature, like animals, body. And during high school, I really got fascinated about how the human body, and in particular the brain, was working in biology class. And so I started psychology. I studied a bachelor in psychology to study more the interaction between mind and the brain. And during my study in psychology and neuropsychology, I discovered research, scientific research, and in particular dementia. And basically I got very fascinated about the brain and when the brain doesn't work well. And it was very devastating seeing all these cases of people with dementia, how they were losing everything that they learned during life, changing personality, losing memory, or losing the capacity of speaking. So during my bachelor, I was very attracted about these aspects, and then I continued my studies with a master's in cognitive neurosciences, and I did my project for my master in nuclear medicine because I discovered neuroimaging during bachelor and master's, and I was very fascinated that finally you could look into the brain in people living with these conditions. So then after that, I moved to Cambridge for my PhD in clinical neurosciences because I really wanted to get deeper in the understanding of what was going wrong in the brain, and also to find potential good markers for clinical trials and new treatments for dementia. So yeah, I started from psychology and then I moved more on molecular imaging, and now I'm introducing also a bit of biology in my studies with fluid markers, post-mortem studies.
That's very interesting to have such a comprehensive understanding of a particular disease. Maura, I was wondering, what is this Race Against Dementia Fellowship? Would you tell us just a little bit about that?
So Race Against Dementia is quite unique because it gives good stability over 5 years for early career researchers trying new ideas. It's a great support in terms of both stability of salary and the project, and really pushes you to try new things, make mistake, change the direction. And the idea is to install Formula One mindset into research, and in particular in dementia research. The founder is Sir Jackie Stewart, a 3-time world champion of Formula One, and he really cares and he feels the urgency of finding a cure for dementia, as his wife, Lady Helen, has a diagnosis of dementia. And so we all feel the urgency, we share this urgency of accelerating dementia research, and Race Against Dementia has been absolutely fantastic in doing that and also creating opportunities for early career researchers.
So does that mean that you are racing together with Sir Jackie Stewart in his cars?
I would wish. I think I cannot stand the chance, but I think we are racing together against dementia, and that is, I think, the most important race also for him at the moment. So it's very good, and I think he always says that in his lifetime he really wants to see the solution for dementia. So we are really pushing hard to see that finishing line together.
Fantastic. Now, Maura, as with many PIAs, we have this year in review, and I was listening recently your summary of the previous year, which was really fascinating and exciting. It seems to me that there is a lot of development going on in frontotemporal dementia. In your view, what is the most exciting area that you believe is going to sort of blossom in the near future?
Well, for sure, I am a bit biased because my main focus is inflammation. I think inflammation has been overlooked for many years, and there's been an explosion in the last few years of potential new targets, new drugs, new biomarkers to measure inflammation, and how also inflammation can really accelerate the clinical decline of people with frontotemporal dementia. But I think in general, the most exciting part of this field is that a lot of disciplines are getting together to find a solution. So we have biologists interacting with psychologists, with medical doctors, with engineers to find the best biomarkers and developing new drugs. So there are a lot of clinical trials ongoing, especially in genetic FTD, in genetic frontotemporal dementia. So I think we are very close to solve maybe genetic frontotemporal dementia, and from there probably to learn something to expand in the sporadic cases. I think the development of biomarkers and new drugs that we can test with these biomarkers is the most exciting part of this particular period of the research field.
There are a lot of excitement about the new clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease as well, and some of the drugs are now being trialed. In your view, for frontotemporal dementia, what is the time scale that you would hope to see some treatment on the market?
It's always tricky. It's always difficult to answer a question about timeline is very difficult to say. The hope is always as soon as possible, especially because some of this condition progresses very quickly, so people don't survive very long. So every year that we waste in not finding a cure or a treatment it is 1 year less for them out of few years that they have left. There is no specific timeline, but we have a lot of exciting clinical trials ongoing, as I said, in genetic FTD, and we have also a lot to learn from other diseases. Like, of course, Alzheimer's disease, we cannot apply amyloid drugs, but we can learn from the clinical trials design of Alzheimer's disease. And also in motor neuron disorders, there are a lot of good clinical trials that we can learn from to apply in frontotemporal dementia or other conditions like multiple sclerosis, for example, if we, for example, look at inflammation. So I think it's a very exciting period, and I hope very soon we will have good treatments to offer to people with dementia.
So that's very interesting, and obviously there is a need for an international collaboration. So I presume that's something that brought you to this particular professional interest area. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of discussions, if they are not confidential, to our audience?
Yes, absolutely. I think collaboration is really key in this kind of, in all dementia field, but especially in conditions that are less common than, for example, Alzheimer's disease, like frontotemporal dementia, progressive supranuclear palsy, corticobasal syndrome. We really need to put all forces together across the world. There are very big consortium out there that are trying to put together forces in genetic FTD, in progressive supranuclear palsy, like for example, Genetic FTD Initiative is an example, which is GEMFI, the name, or All FTD is another example. And I think the FTD PIA really cares about this collaborative effort and like this collaboration, and some of the members, then we can touch a bit more about the members and how this is structured, but basically they are leading part of these worldwide initiatives. And we also collaborate quite closely with the International Society for Frontotemporal Dementia to bring together even more forces. So there are a lot of discussions on how we can bring together even more possible opportunities to collaborate. Discussion also with other PIAs, like the Diversity and Disparities PIA. This is very important because in frontotemporal dementia, we really don't know how diversity impacts on the clinical outcomes. So we are trying to put together some ideas on projects or potential, reviews and discussions on how we can explore diversity in different countries, for example, considering different ethnicities, backgrounds, etc. And also there has been some discussion with the PIA for clinical trials, advancement and methods to try to come together with new ideas on how we can accelerate the clinical trials in frontotemporal dementia.
Okay, so this collaboration with the other PIAs you consider as an important part of the whole.
Yeah, and I think also it's very important because the FTD PIA is a platform, right? Is where we can really bring together people from different fields and different disciplines. So even with webinars or discussions or the member meeting that is twice a year, we have member meetings. These are all opportunities to have conversations and discussion and potential new collaborations. And also we really care of highlighting early career researchers and like their work. We have few initiatives about that, like especially later in this year, because we really care about also the new generation of dementia researchers. And given that this frontotemporal dementia and related condition PIA is so young and is expanding so fast, we are already over 650 members, and we are really trying to bring everyone together and highlighting the new generation that maybe we'll find the cure.
Oh, that sounds really exciting, and it's fantastic to hear that you have such a dynamic group with, I presume, lots of early career scientists joining. that brings me to the question, is that okay that you would tell us a little bit about the structure, who else are involved in the PIA?
Yes, so the PIA is composed by this committee. I'm the programs chair, so I'm looking at contents, webinar, etc. Then we have the chair, who is John Roer from UCL in the UK. We have a vice chair, who is Vicky Fernandez Hernandez, who was based in US and she's moving very soon to Spain. Then we have a communication chair, who is Carmela Tartaglia from Canada, and she's also the communication chair of International Society of Frontotemporal Dementia, so we are collaborating very closely on that. And also we have a postdoc member representative, who is Lucy Cheeseman-Russell from London as well. So I think in comparison to other PIAs, our committee is very fluid. We don't assign there is a communication chairs, of course, that has a specific task. I have different tasks, but we really come together to bring all ideas and some of the, for example, the postdoc member can curate the contents of the webinar as much as the program chair, and as a program chair I can suggest things for Twitter or the email as much as the communication chair. So it's very, collaborative and all on the same level and floor.
That's really exciting, and I think you mentioned that you have a very dynamic group, so that means that you probably have lots of ideas. Would you tell us what you are planning to do in the coming year within your PIA?
Yeah, of course. This year, so this committee started last summer, the end of the summer, so in September. And in this year, we already put together a few things. We hosted, for example, a journal club in October. It was meeting the authors, so there were two early career researchers, Sid Ramanan from Cambridge and Adit Fredberg from UCSF, who presented two very interesting papers published the year before. And they also moderated the chat and discussion with the authors and the audience. It was very interesting to hear. And then we had in February a year in review with Jackie Poos to basically revise all the FTD and related disorders papers of the previous year. We had also a webinar about FTD basics in April with Carmela Tartaglia, which I suggest everyone to listen and every students out there to look in on the ISTAART website, because it was absolutely outstanding lecture. And then we had also this half-day webinar about progressive supranuclear palsy and not just Richardson syndrome, with 6 early career researchers speaking and 3 more senior moderators, and it was excellent. So our promise is this is just the basis, and basically next year we will propose very similar activities like the journal club, educational webinar, probably again something related to PSP and CBS, progressive supranuclear palsy and cortical basal syndrome. But yeah, we have also something coming up very soon that is in the conference at Alzheimer Association International Conference. So you should stay tuned. And if you have ideas, you are part of this PIA and you have ideas, just write to us. We are very welcome. You are very welcome to suggest anything, and we are always very happy to implement new ideas.
So Maura, not all of the listeners necessarily member of any of these PIAs. You mentioned that these talks are available. Would you tell just a little bit as an information to others that how to access these recorded presentations?
So yes, on the ISTAART website there is a long list of recorded webinars and events, and in general they are uploaded around 2 weeks after the event itself. So for example, mid-April you will have at the beginning of May available online. And you just need to click, for example, ISTAART PIA Frontotemporal Dementia webinar, and you should find it. But you can also register for these webinars. They are always online, like live on Zoom in general. They are free, and everyone around the world can sign up, and they can just write like a click if they are a member or not at the moment of the webinar. So it's very good, and it's very good because we can reach all corners of the world because it's online. We are trying always to be very fair with time zones. Sometimes Australia is left out in terms of time zone, but for that reason there is the recording and people can always catch up.
Great. Now, you were very mysterious about what you are planning for the AAIC. Any hints that you could give us? So why would people look out specifically for the Frontotemporal Dementia PIA activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are starting actually before the conference itself, in the day that preceded the conference, that is called the PIA Day, and we are participating. If you are around, that Saturday is the 15th of July, and our session will start at 2:45 p.m. local time. And it is very exciting because for the first time as PIA, we are presenting the Publication of the Year award. It is the first time that we do that. I will not tell who won, but basically we will have one of the authors presenting the work, and it was voted as best publication of the year related to some of that have been submitted for this award. Then we will have also 6 talks from early career researchers, very competitive selection. We received a lot of submissions and it was very good to see so much nice work out there. And we will have also a brief networking session. This is just before AIC. But during the conference, we will also vote for the first time. We will have a postdoc and student poster award. And so we will have one for the postdoc and one for the students. And this will be announced after the conference, but we will come. If you see Carmela Tartaglia and me going around the posters, it's because we are evaluating posters. There's been a lot of submissions as well. I would remind everyone next year, when you submit the abstract for AIC, you can click ISTAART FTD as a keyword, I believe, to be selected as part of these kind of awards, and also for the pre-conference day. So yeah, a lot of exciting things and very early career centric. So yeah.
Fantastic. Now, you talk a lot about what you are going to do at AAIC, but will you be presenting at the conference?
Yes, so I will present 2 abstracts actually. One will be a poster, and it will be my work in blood markers in frontotemporal dementia and related disorders, and how this relates to PET with a focus on inflammation. And then I will be part also of FRS, which I believe is a future research session about inflammation, so about macroglia activation, astrocytes. There will be 4 or 5 talks with very other senior speakers, so it will be very exciting, and I believe it's on Monday. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion about inflammation actually.
So if you don't mind, it's really a personal question, because I'd like to understand a little bit more about your views on the inflammation. So we know that microglia is very much in focus at the moment on all diseases, but it's somewhat more difficult to target a cell. So are there particular inflammatory processes, molecular processes, that you think are very promising?
Oh, that's an excellent question. There are so many different aspects that we need to consider. We just started from macroglia activation, but there is also astrocytes ongoing. There is the complement markers now that are exploding as well. We are very interested to look at the storm of cytokines and chemokines, for example, and how the periphery interacts with the central inflammation, and if it is a bidirectional talk. And for this, we really need like different types of biomarkers, like PET, that is super powerful and can measure one target, with something that is a bit less specific, like blood markers or CSF markers, and but can measure a lot of targets at the same time. I think it's a very dynamic process, so we need so much information. And also, very recently, we are starting a new network in the UK, which is called Inflammation, is a open network for inflammation research in frontotemporal dementia. We're involving many centers across the UK, and the idea is looking at the immune system in people with frontotemporal dementia and how different background information and factors can influence these, and also in some way mediating the clinical outcomes. So I think there is much more research coming in the next few years, and exciting stuff.
Very excited about your PIA's work in general, although I work on the eye, and our PIA is using the eye as a biomarker, but I have endeavored into frontotemporal dementia and the connection with the eye, and I think it's going to be very exciting that if these PIAs can start talking together to use each other's expertise, especially since we are sharing so many similarities, like the complement system's role in eye and other things. So it's a very exciting field, and I must say the whole dementia research is a very exciting territory right now.
And so, also, you mentioned AI, and I completely agree with you, because now we are basically starting to have very big data in frontotemporal dementia as well. So, of course, AI is a crucial role in defining, data-driven staging, data-driven approaches and selection.
I was wondering about that because obviously what you were telling so far, there is a lot of multimodality in researching the frontotemporal dementia. So is there a particular grouping within your PIA or anywhere where you would be working with people on this domain?
So there are a few people that I know who are working on that. For example, there is a Tim Ritman in Cambridge working on AI and how these can be applied to progressive supranuclear palsy, for example, like detecting brain changes. In GEMFI, there are many people looking at the pre-symptomatic phase of frontotemporal dementia, so trying to identify with some data-driven approach the staging and the progression even before symptoms appear. And also, like Jake Vogel, for example, recently published some papers on this sustain approach to see how we can stage based on MRI or the markers frontotemporal dementia progression. So there are, and these are just few examples, right? Like in the world, there are so many people, clever people, applying AIC and machine learning into these conditions, and I think it is very interesting. Of course, we will never try to replace neurologists out there, but
that's
I think
the political speak.
Yeah. But I think AI can be very good support.
No, this is a very interesting topic. I often get this question that can we detect Alzheimer's disease or dementia in the eye, and I keep telling them that even neurologists have a problem identifying disease when they study the brain, let alone when you are doing something different. So no, I agree with you. Probably we are not there yet, although the challenges with AI has been highlighted recently. So it's an interesting domain to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
So this was a very, very exciting discussion, Maura. And before I let you go, I wanted to ask a final question. If you ask that question, why someone should sign up to your professional interest area, what would you tell them?
Well, I hope that tonight I convinced you how exciting is the field and also the FTD PIA group, and how we are trying really to push on collaborations, new ideas, bringing together people, different disciplines. So, and also highlighting early career researchers. So I really hope that everyone out there who has even just an interest about frontotemporal dementia, not necessarily working on frontotemporal dementia, but wants to learn more with our educational webinars or being part of the discussion with the member meetings, biannual member meetings, or even just being part of suggesting what we should focus on. I think you should just sign up and be part of the discussion and the new ideas out there. And if you have also ideas on potential collaborations with different centers, or you know that maybe someone is in the FTD PIA and they have interesting data that you may want to look at, we should just get together and have a chat. And if we can facilitate that, that is also part of the aim of this platform.
Thank you very much. I must say the year in review of all these PIAs are actually fantastic. I don't have to read all those papers. Someone else digest it for me, but it really gives a fantastic overview. Well, thank you very much, and I wish you all the best and enjoy Amsterdam. And I'd like to say to the audience that I'd like to thank Dr. Maura Malpetti for her time to join us today. And thank you all for tuning in. You can find profiles of myself and my brilliant guest and information on how to become involved in the ISTAART on our website at dementiaresearch.nihr.ac.uk and also at www.oz.org/ISTAART. These links, of course, can be found in the notes below. I was Imre Lengyel, and you've been listening to the Relay podcast from Dementia Research and the Alzheimer's Association. We will be back tomorrow, so hit subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app to ensure you don't miss an episode. Thank you. And thank you, Maura.
Thank you so much.
Brought to you by Dementia Researcher.nihr.ac.uk in association with Alzheimer's Research UK, Alzheimer's Society, Race Against Dementia, and the Alzheimer's Association, bringing you research, news, career tips, and support.